So we'll begin by adding some twists to the torso. I'll go into transpose move mode, hold down Control, and then click and drag down the torso. And that'll transpose mask down to the waist. I'm going to invert that, then click and drag a transpose line up the length of the body. And go into rotate mode, and we will rotate. I'm going to paint out a little bit of the mask here. Control click on it to feather it. Go back into rotate mode. And I will raise this end point. I'm going to lean the body a bit. I'm going to mask down the neck, invert that mask, and then go into rotate mode. I'm going to straighten the head out a bit like that. And now I will rotate the head. Mask a bit more up the neck. Rotate it again. To get a good pose, you typically have to keep masking and rotating, masking and rotating, just working your way towards the pose. I'm going to go back to the move brush here and correct that little tweak there in the neck. And let's go ahead and mask the head. Invert that mask. And here we go. Now I'm going to lean the head back, so I'm going to rotate it back like that. And I'm going to lean the head back at its cervical vertebrae like that. There we go. That's creepy. I can give him a little bit of a profile. Nah, I like where it was. And I'll go ahead and transpose down to the arm. Make sure that the mask catches everything along the back. I'm going to bend the elbow here. I'll drag the transpose line down to the lateral epicondyle. It's the bony landmark right here on the outside of the elbow. Drag it there, hold down the Alt key, and bend. And you'll notice it bends the body with it because I forgot to mask. I'll mask down to that point, and then I'll draw my line again. Alt, click, and drag that point to bend the elbow. And go back in with the move brush. And just adjust the volumes there. Make sure that you don't collapse the volumes of the arm. And I like to bring the elbow out. Make sure that's a nice sharp protrusion there. Because as you bend the elbow, that bone, which is called the olecranon process, is the technical name for the elbow, in case you ever wondered, that has a tendency to jut out when it's bending. So let's just stick that out a bit. There we go. And I'm going to bend the forearm. So I'll draw my transpose mask down to here, go into rotate mode, make sure this endpoint is the last one I touched, and I'm just going to alt click and drag that point there. Then go back into the move brush and correct any kind of funky twisting you might get there. And actually, I don't like that. I'm going to undo that. I'll revisit that part of the pose in a little bit, but what was happening there I definitely just didn't like, so I'm not going to stick to that. Here we are. I'm going to hide those legs again. Go visibility, hide point, just because I'm not used to looking at them on this figure. Since they're unfinished, I find them distracting. Since we're not going to be moving the hips, I don't need to worry about having them hidden. I just need to make sure that they're returned to visibility before I return the model to the original, or before I transfer the pose to the original model. So at this point I'm masking, oops, let's turn off X symmetry there. I'm masking out the other arm. I want to start doing some work on that one. I'll invert the mask, and then using the transpose line, let's rotate that forward, and I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to paint out a little bit more in the pectoralis here, and go back to rotate. So I'm trying to get away from that collapse in the pectoralis muscle there. Let's actually paint that in again. So I want to get that swing through there of the scapula. So we'll clear that mask, and let's bring that pectoralis down and forward. Going to turn down the intensity on my smooth brush and just gently smooth that back a little bit. Bring it forward. Move my light around a bit here and just look at how this guy's looking. And you can do a bit of posing or a bit of sculpting here in Transpose Master. You shouldn't be afraid to try and correct any deformations early on as you're sculpting the pose, as you're bringing these scapulas around. Go ahead and correct the forms there. I'm going to save my work again. Just save Transpose Master Project, and I'll just save it over itself. Okay, it's saved the project now, and I can continue my posing. I think I'm going to try and swing the arm forward and up. Switching from the mouse to my tablet pen. When I'm transposing, sometimes I actually will use the mouse. It just depends on what gives me more control. I'm going to unmask a bit of the pec and then go into transpose mode and see if it's best for me to rotate it like this, or if it's best for me to rotate it using bone posing like that. So I'm going to switch into an accelerated time lapse for this posing. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm trying to pull the structure of the arm forward. It's a bit of a a push and pull game because the arm moves forward via the shoulder girdle. It's not moving forward so much just at the rotation of the humerus. So you really have to work that shape by a combination of rotating along a couple different axes just to get it to rotate forward accurately. And you want to be careful of that pectoralis muscle as well because it's pulling it and it's contracting as it's pulling it forward. Using bone posing there on the elbow, that's Alt-click in that last circle, and then rotating the forearm so it can be supinated. Supination is when the palm is facing upward, and then pronation is when the palm is facing downward. Those are the names of the two types of rotation of the forearm. I'm raising this hand here. Part of the pose is ultimately he's going to have that arm raised, and he's going to have the centipede climbing up that arm. So just in the interest of time, since you don't necessarily want to sit here and watch me kind of noodle the pose, we're going to move ahead just a little bit and just jump ahead a bit in the posing process. So we moved ahead a bit, and that brings us now to posing the hands. And the hands I'm posing almost entirely using the bone pose procedure, where you just click Alt and then click and drag in the last circle of the transpose line. It gives you a nice pose, a nice bend for the fingers because it stretches the knuckle and it compresses the underside of finger as you bend that way. So I'm just trying to really give a nice posture into this hand. I want there to be a lot of tension in these fingers and in the wrist. And I'm approaching the pose of the hand with a general idea. I know what I want out of the pose, and I've got an idea just by looking at my own hand as I'm working, what I want to go for, but it will develop as I work on it. As I pose this hand, it'll start to do some interesting things. I might find that it works better if the fingers are spread a little bit more than my fingers happen to be spread, or I'm modeling for this myself. Or maybe I decide that I want to, raise the pinky a little bit more. So, just like any other part of the sculpture, posing the hands really does develop as you move through it. So now we're posing a hand on the other arm. This is the one that will be cradling that centipede later on. And this is just like the posing that we did on the other hand. Exact same process, actually. It's just a matter of finding a different character in this particular pose. Since this hand is going to be, holding something. Now, at this point, I'm unmasking the last two fingers and then rotating them. Because if you cup your hand, look at what happens when you bring your thumb in to touch your pinky. Look at how those two fingers, those phalanges can actually roll over slightly. That's the cupping of the palm. That's how you grip objects. And it's really important to get that into your hand when you're posing it if you want it to feel natural. Because, relax your own hand. You see that you've got a natural crease that runs diagonally between your index and middle finger down to the base of your palm. That fold is just going to happen when your hand relaxes. So it's one of those things that I just hadn't thought of putting in. And then once I realized that's what was missing in my hands that I was sculpting, it was, really felt like a great epiphany for me when I figured that out. I think I just recognized it. I can't remember where. I think I recognized it in another sculpture somewhere. I think I was just looking at a hand and realizing, oh wait, which is ridiculous because you really should notice those things because you've got two hands, hopefully, that are constantly with you that you can observe. But it's funny how sometimes these little things escape you. I think it just goes to prove what they say, that being a good artist is just being a good observer. Observing what is realistic. So, using the transpose tool to pose the head, trying to find just the right attitude for his head. And really, the inclination and positioning of the head can just change so much about a character. It's one of those things that can really, push something in one direction or another. So, I actually revisit that head all the way up to the very end when I cut and rotate it manually in Photoshop, just to change the angle of the head.